So what I love about this passage is how real it is. This relationship between God and God's people and the relationship with Moses and Aaron, this is not a kumbaya community where everybody just loves each other to pieces and everyone's grateful all the time. There are complaints and perceived injustices and even whining. The people of God are not portrayed kindly, and they don't look on God too kindly either, or their leaders. But it's also real about how hard life can be. Not just for refugees escaping violence, but for much of humanity, much of the time. There are Egypts and deserts everywhere. Some of them are very personal, and some of them are wider in this world. And sometimes it's hard to trust that God will provide for our needs. It's just hard. Sometimes we can't see that God is already providing. And it's only in retrospect that we can look back and see the hand of God leading us and guiding us through all the highs and lows of our own lives. And then when we see it, what we feel is gratitude. What we feel is grateful. The stories you're about to hear are from our fellow travelers along the journey. They're giving witness to God's presence in their own lives through this church and through their life of faith. And they give witness to the power of a community of faith. And I think that hearing their stories will help us reflect on our own lives too. Both the wilderness moments and the unexpected blessings. What I know is that hearing their stories filled me with gratitude as well. So thank you.
I also stand before you today with a heart full of gratitude for this church, for our members, and for our staff. You may or may not know that I've had a fairly difficult last 5+ years. And I'm going to get a little personal with you all, but only because I feel it is important as it relates to the blessing of this church and this congregation. In the past 5 years, my daughter has been hospitalized 7 times, including a 2-month stint in Denver, Colorado. She had severe struggles with anxiety and an eating disorder, and we only learned around the 6th hospitalization that she was actually bipolar and incorrect medications had been causing severe imbalances and complicating her situation. I went through a divorce and had my 3 children living with me full-time. My parents, who were faithful members of this congregation and lived locally, health failed for various reasons, and they passed away. They were my number 1 supporters. My best friend was killed in a fatal car crash. And just when I thought 2018 might be a normal year, my youngest son produced the largest bone tumor that Children's and the James Hospital had ever seen. To say I've had a rough time might be putting it mildly. But this being said, I am always one to look on the bright side, to turn the lemons into lemonade, to seek the light, and to know that it could be worse, and to trust that God is with me through it all. I share this with all of you today because I could not have gotten through this or have the attitude that I do without the First Presbyterian Church. This community surrounded my family with a powerful promise of God's love in action. with meals, rides, frequent flyer miles, visits to my house in times of crisis, hand-holding by hospital beds, cards and hugs, and many, many prayers. Our staff. Our amazing staff was also unflagging through my storms. Janice, who was with me daily as I learned the news that my dad's appendicitis was actually the incurable appendiceal cancer, and that he only had months to live. She helped me process the grave news and make critical decisions about my mom, who had Alzheimer's, care. Later, she served to be one of the few who continued to visit my mother regularly. And for those of you who didn't know Sally, she was not always easy to be with in her final years. Joy. Joy, who gives her heart and soul to her choir kids. Joy and I share many of the same students, and so I hear firsthand not only of how she helps them learn about commitment and dedication, but also who is a listening ear and a supporter of all they do. Upon my father's death and knowing his steadfast dedication and love for this church and his love for the angel choir, rallied her troops to sing at his funeral. A great gift to us all, and I know he was smiling. Ellen, who has tenderly loved my children from baby to young adulthood, guided them all as they each taught Sunday school and did such things as organize helpers for our family, to picking up the boys from school upon my father's death, to arriving with cards and balloons for Scotty, and hugs and a soothing presence for me when I was alone following Scotty's surgery. Tripp, who was a steady presence to my boys when I needed to be with my daughter in Denver and following my divorce, whose hand I was holding during prayer as my father took his last breath, who visited my son following his surgery, even when his own son was sick, to being such a cool pastor that at least one of my children may consider ministry their call. Karen. I could give a whole sermon about Karen. Karen's leadership makes this church what it is. She guides the staff, the lay leaders, and all of us to use our hearts and hands and minds to bring Christ's love into the world. On a personal level, she's been with me physically or in spirit through each and every trial of the past several years. And she's been a constant encourager of my daughter as she moved into great health and adulthood. Karen has inspired me to be strong, but often saw me at my weakness as I made extremely difficult decisions about my life, about my kids, and about my parents. This is just a slice of my story, but I feel that it is important to realize that this type of outreach and care and vital support is happening every day in this church. Our staff is walking beside someone in crisis all the time, helping them to make life-altering decisions, to trust God, to keep the faith, and help them emerge still shining. My story and the story of my children have been shaped for the good by our incredible staff and this congregation. Every day, my heart is full of gratitude for the gift that we have at First Presbyterian Church. Thank you.